Good morning. I hope you've had a chance to read that little Bible passage from Mark chapter 14, verses 1 to 11. And I'd like you just to, as we begin, turn to verse 6, which is our key verse for this morning. This lady has poured this perfume on Jesus. The disciples have tried to rebuke her. And Jesus says, "Leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me." Jesus says to this lady, "You have done a beautiful thing for me." And then we have verse 9. "Truly I tell you," Jesus says, "wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." And here we are, 14th of March 2021, in the southeast of England, still speaking about what this lady did. This beautiful thing she did for Jesus. And the question I've been asking all week, the question I feel God has spoken to me about, has been this: what would it look like for me to do a beautiful thing for Jesus? What would it look like for me to do a beautiful thing for Jesus? Our passage today comes from chapter 14 in Mark's Gospel. And as soon as these events have happened, the next thing Mark moves on to in his Gospel, just if you've got a Bible, look down, is the Last Supper. So these events happen just before the events of Holy Week, Maundy Thursday, and then Good Friday. And therefore it seems to me a very fitting passage for Lent. And the passage is a classic, what they call the Mark's Gospel sandwich. And this is where Mark has one story, which goes at the beginning and the end of a passage, and then another story in the middle. And we see that here, don't we? So verses 1 and 2, we meet the chief priests and teachers of the law, trying to find a way to arrest Jesus and kill him. But of course, they're fearful of a riot, so they're not quite sure how to do that. And then the passage ends, and we're back again with the chief priests, but now we have Judas, who was promising to give money to them, they're promising to give Judas money, so that Judas would betray Jesus, so they could arrest him and kill him. And in the middle of these two events, we have this little incident of where this lady does a beautiful thing for Jesus. Strikes me, we've got wickedness at the beginning, wickedness at the end, and beauty in the middle. It's also, we start to see a contrast, don't we? The chief priests and the teachers of the law, they're not in control. They're sort of being bumped aside by the crowd, and they have to get Judas on side to get him to betray Jesus at a moment they can arrest him. By contrast, we see Jesus in this. He's in absolute control. He knows where he's going. Have a look with me. Verse 8. "She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial." Jesus knows exactly where he's going. These two stories in this sandwich contrasting with each other. Wickedness with beauty, and control on one sense with chaos. And it's understanding those contrasts that helps us understand what Mark wants to teach us. So two things I've got to say. First, it's going to be quite long. Second one, a little bit shorter. So the first thing is this. This woman does a beautiful thing for Jesus. Let's go back and have a look at this story together. So the scene for this incident is Bethany, which I believe is about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. We know from verse 3 that we're at Simon the leper's house. I take it that Simon probably is no longer a leper, because you wouldn't be allowed to host people in your house if you were. So I'm guessing he was somebody that Jesus healed. He was a leper, but has come to meet Jesus and has been healed. And here he is, hosting a dinner party. There's a whole variety of people present, but it does seem like the disciples, at least, are there. And then suddenly, in the midst of this meal, this woman comes in. Now, the striking thing to note here is she is not named. We know nothing about her. We don't even know her name. And that is really striking in Mark's Gospel, because often in Mark's Gospel we do get detail of names. Later on in this chapter we're going to find out about Alexander and Rufus, because it was their father who carried Jesus' cross. And we're going to learn the names of the women who found the empty tomb, Mary and Salome. But this woman is unnamed. And that reminds me, you don't have to be a famous Christian to do beautiful things for Jesus. I want us, any of us, can do a beautiful thing for Jesus. But what does she do? Well, we know she has this alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. So back in those days, you'd have had perfume in these jars that was seriously expensive. We know, don't we, from verse 5, that it could have been sold for more than a year's wages. So the Office for National Statistics says the average household income in this country is £26,500. So we've got £26,500 of perfume. This is expensive stuff. I don't know anything about perfume. I had a quick look on the perfume shop's website to see what the most expensive perfume was. I think they get up to about £365 a bottle. Interesting, that's for a man's aftershave rather than a women's fragrance. I think that was the ladies' one was about £345 when I looked this week. But this is in another league. This is seriously expensive perfume. And the other thing about this perfume is once you break the jar, it's gone. Once you break the jar, you get to smell the perfume, but then it's gone. What does she do? She breaks the jar and pours perfume on Jesus' head. Trying to think what would be a sort of equivalent. I think it's like having a vintage bottle of wine. So I went on Google and looked up the most expensive bottle of wine. Apparently in 2018, at a Sotheby's sale in New York, an Asian collector paid $558,000 for a 1945 Domaine de la Homene Conti Grand Cru. I assume that means something to someone. It doesn't mean a lot to me. But that is a very expensive bottle of wine. But of course, the wine is expensive while it's in the bottle. But what happens when you pop the cork and you drink it? You can drink this wonderful $558,000 bottle of wine. But of course, at that point, the value's gone. You just have to enjoy it. And I think it's a bit like that with this perfume. Once you break the jar, its value's gone. You just have to enjoy it. And this is what this lady does. She breaks the jar and she pours perfume on Jesus' head. It's extravagant. It's an absolutely extravagant thing to do. You can imagine you were the owner of this famous bottle of wine, $558,000 worth, and the person you shared it with would probably be the person you value most, you love the most, probably. Well, that's what this lady has done with Jesus. She has taken probably the most valuable thing she owns, something of great value, and she's poured it out, she's shared it with Jesus. Commentators get very excited. Was it a dowry? Was it the inheritance? It certainly seems to have been of enormous value. Now, the reaction of the people at the dinner table is interesting. So, verse 4, some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume?" I just thought, what's she doing? This is madness. It could have been sold for more than a year's wages, and the money given to the poor. And they rebuked her harshly. don't know about you, as I read this story, I slightly draw to these people. Would I have been one there saying these things? But then I hear verse 6, and Jesus says this, leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. Jesus says, breaking this perfume, giving away all this money, so to speak, on Jesus was a beautiful thing. Jesus continues, the poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Jesus seems to be saying, actually caring for the poor, there's a right time and a place for that. And I think the Bible is clear that as a church, we do have a responsibility to care for the weakest and most marginalised in our communities, starting for those within the household of faith. But at this moment in history, at this moment here at this dinner party, Jesus says that is the right thing to do. Jesus says it was a beautiful thing to pour out this on him out of love. See, this woman, it seems, understood who Jesus was. There's a debate. Does she know where he's going? Has she listened when he said he's going to go and die? But that's what Jesus is going to do for us. This woman does a beautiful thing for Jesus. And it seems to me that Mark is encouraging us, as he writes his gospel, to want to do the same thing, to have that same commendation. Wouldn't it be lovely for Jesus to say to us, you have done a beautiful thing for me? And here's the challenge of this passage, you see. What has God given us? This woman has this wonderful bottle of perfume and she pours it out on Jesus because he is physically present. Jesus is no longer physically present. He's ascended. He's at the right hand of the Father. And he will one day return. So what does it look like to pour ourselves out, pour out our time, our resources, our money, and do beautiful things for Jesus today? So let me ask, what gifts has God given you? What resources has God given you? What money has God given you? And how might you use them to do a beautiful thing for Jesus today? The Bible says that Jesus is currently building his church. As the good news of Jesus goes out and people respond in repentance and faith, it seems to me that a beautiful thing to do would be serving Jesus' church today. And there's lots of ways to apply this. I'm going to just go on a few little trajectories and you can have a think if they apply to you. Has God given you a gift? We're all good at different things. Some of us are good at craft. Some of us are good at carpentry. Some of us are good at DIY. Some of us like painting. Some are good at gardening. Some of us are good at letter writing. Some of us are good at sewing. How could you use those practical gifts you've got to do a beautiful thing for Jesus? For example, if you like craft, we have Messy Church at St Eth's once a month, and we're going to be starting something called Together, a similar sort of idea at St Matthew's later on this year, once a month. We're hoping to have a holiday club in the summer. We want to do some fantastic crafts for children to do. Could you help prepare one of those? Even if you don't want to be with children, you could help prepare the crafts. And it means then when people like me lead a group who is clueless when it comes to craft, children can have something brilliant. Maybe you're good at gardening or DIY. Well, let me tell you, there's an endless list of gardening and DIY tasks across both our churches. Maybe you could volunteer some time to help them. Maybe you're good at Letter writing. Well, there's lots of people you could write to encourage. Send a card. In this country and abroad. How could you use your gifts to do a beautiful thing for Jesus? Maybe God has given you the gift of time. Maybe you're on furlough at the moment. And maybe you're retired. How could you use your time to do a beautiful thing for Jesus? Now, there's so many different ways you could use your time. And we're looking for people to give time in all sorts of ministries, particularly as they begin to restart in the next few weeks and months. And yes, there is the organised activities, and do ask either St Matthews or St Ethelburgers about what there is to be involved in. But also there's the time to just do the one-to-one work. At the moment, we're allowed to go and have a walk and sit down and have a cup of coffee with one other person. Could you do that for someone in the church family? Someone I know goes out each week and has a walk with someone who's struggling with dementia in their church family. And they now take a flask and have a cup of coffee halfway round. Isn't that a great example of using time to do a beautiful thing for Jesus? You see, and it's not only going out for a walk with the people you know and your friends, in one sense that's easy, but maybe someone you don't know very well. Why not ping them a message and say, do you fancy going for a walk? We can walk down to the seafront and take a flask and have a cup of coffee. Maybe just give them a phone call. Just look through your either if you're a address book, if you've got a paper one, or your phone, and think, who could I give a ring to and see how they're doing? And maybe meet up with them. That's a beautiful thing to do for Jesus. Finally, we need to be honest. God may have given us the gift of money. And there's plenty of Christian projects within the life of our own church, but also throughout the world, where we could give money to serve Jesus and do a beautiful thing for him. We always have a need at both our churches for general giving, but actually if you've got a lump sum you'd like to give, and maybe you say, well, maybe there's a little project I would like to give to, talk to me, or more to probably better to talk to Tom or Janet, and say, I'd like to give a gift, is there a little project? I've got a list of things I'd love to be able to do in the life of our churches that will make a big difference. It was very lovely last year. We were given a gift that means we can employ an administrator at St Ethelburgers, because someone gave us a one-off gift. That gift has made a massive difference in what we can do, and was a beautiful thing to do for Jesus. But as we think about this, I want us just to note the reaction of those present. See, have a look at verse 4. People spoke indignantly of this woman, and they rebuke her harshly, verse 5. It reminds me that sometimes when we do a beautiful thing for Jesus, the world around us will think we're a bit nuts. How many people do I know who've given up money for you to give to the church? Maybe given up a holiday, given up moving house, paid off a mortgage and then taken out another one to give to church. On a personal level, I remember when I told my boss that I was going to give up being a lawyer to train for ordained ministry. He thought I was nuts. People may well be indignant. And sometimes our family will be indignant, particularly if they are not followers of Jesus Christ. If in your will you decide to leave a legacy to for the cause of the gospel, either to a local church or to another Christian organisation, some people won't understand that. And they may be indignant. And we need to be aware that comes with the territory. This woman, she did something extraordinary for Jesus. And they rebuked her. And Jesus says, no, leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. This woman does a beautiful thing for Jesus. I think there's a call to be like this woman, to do a beautiful thing for Jesus. But I said there's a second thing. I just want to say a few words because Jesus, of course, does a beautiful thing for us. We see it hinted here She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Where is Jesus going to go? He is going to do a beautiful thing for us, the greatest act of love ever. He, the innocent one, the one who will see in the trial, did nothing wrong, will die in our place. He will bear God's wrath. He will take the judgment we deserve so that we might be forgiven. And he will triumph over death to give us hope beyond the grave. That is a beautiful thing. Friends, as Jesus calls us to do beautiful things for him, we don't do that to earn his favour. He loved us first. He has done a wonderful, beautiful thing for us. And therefore, as we respond, we do it with grateful hearts. Not because we're compelled to, but like this woman, because we want to. Because we love Jesus. This woman did a beautiful thing for Jesus. Jesus has done a beautiful thing for us. What beautiful thing can we do for him? Let's pray. Dear Father, thank you for this passage this morning and all the challenges it brings. We thank you for this woman and what she did, pointing to what extravagant, extraordinary love looks like. We thank you for Jesus' love for us. Please stir our hearts that we might do beautiful things for you. Amen.